Hello everybody, welcome to Books Up Close. My name's Chris Lloyd, hope you're doing well. This is a video of everything I read in October, less than previous months, but some of them are good, some of them are rereads because I've been obviously reading a lot for work, so I'll talk about those later. But let's just get into the Sally Rooney and Intermezzo, which I finished reading at the start of this month. Here's Freddie again, so everyone can say hi. He loves being involved in these things. Are you going to jump across? So Intermezzo is Sally's fourth novel. Now, if you know me, you know I like Sally Rooney. I've got all her books. I've read them all. I find her compulsively readable, if never fully satisfying. And I think I've probably said this before about Normal People, and I think I've reviewed the other ones on here somewhere along the line. And I don't know what it is. I still can't work it out. I think at a prose level, she's very readable, very consumable. I fly through the books quite quickly. She writes with a great ear, I think, for both speech, but as well as kind of just like the cadence, like the narrator's cadence is really consumable to me. It really hits a particular mark. However, I always feel left wanting by the end of the book for some reason. I think Beautiful World, Where Are You? Was great, but had some flaws. I think Normal People, which a lot of you I know probably like the least of hers, I think is, for me, one of the most successful ones because the narrative form, that kind of jumping forward in time, actually correlates really strongly with the content. And here in this book, the form of like switching back and forth between the two brothers, it focuses on these two brothers in the aftermath of their father's death. I didn't fully love it. There's one brother who I like way more than the other. You can probably guess who that is. But I found the chopping and changing annoying. I didn't entirely love the stylistic choices of both voices either. Peter is this lawyer, and his narrative voice is this kind of internal monologue. It's very kind of choppy and awkward. I didn't fully believe it. It felt like a kind of lesser version of what Amo McBride is doing, right, in The Less Bohemians or A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing, although not to that extreme, obviously. But I didn't feel like I fully bought that internal voice. Ivan, on the other hand, his narration is more interesting to me. It feels more true to describing a consciousness without having to like do full interior monologue stuff. Like, I think sometimes the form can get in the way, is what I'm saying. And while everyone keeps talking about this book being a kind of maturation of Rooney's themes, here she talks about faith, she talks about polyamory in various ways. She talks about different things, but like, I don't think it's really an extension of what she's done before. I think it's more of the same, and that's not a critique at all, but I don't see this as a kind of extension of what she's been doing this whole time, a kind of development, a more kind of mature version of those earlier novels. I think it's just more of the same, and that's great. Like, some novelists do that, and I'm not mad at all. I was expecting something. It didn't live up to some of the reviews I read that said it was this kind of magisterial version of what she's been doing the whole time. So anyway, we learn about these two brothers, we learn about their romantic entanglements, some of which I bought, some of which I didn't. It's a nice setup. It just didn't like spark me. It didn't make me think, oh my God, I've never read this before, right? And that's how I always feel about a Rooney novel. But having said that, I still massively enjoy them. So that's not a huge critique, it's just, it is what it is. So I read Intermezzo finally and had to kind of fly through it because of the millennial stuff I'm doing in my academic research. So there's a good reason to kind of like push ahead and read it. This month I also got a lovely proof of Open Heaven by the lovely Sean Hewitt, who is a good friend and lovely person all round. You know, I've reviewed his other books here, his poetry, his nonfiction. This is his first novel, and actually it surprised me. It's way more low-key, way quieter than I expected. I think because of All Down Darkness Wide was such a kind of intense memoir, right? It's really aesthetically, intellectually, emotionally, it's working really hard. It's very rigorous. It's so intense from page one to the very end. And I don't know, I think I was expecting something along those lines. Or even the poetry, when it leans into kind of like nature, it still has a real kind of like richness of language, a real intensity of language. This novel is much quieter, much quieter. It's about a boy who kind of falls in love with a straight friend and charts a kind of year in their life through the 4 seasons. It's structured through the 4 seasons. It's bookended by that boy in the present going back to the farmhouse they once lived in as he's dealing with the breakup of his own marriage to a man now. And yeah, it's just mainly this kind of long flashback. It's mainly just charting that kind of the cycle of the seasons. It's very attentive to the natural world, as you'd expect. It's attentive to the body in ways you'll have seen in Hewitt's other stuff. Yeah, it's a very quiet, small novel. You can fit it in with kind of like the Philippe Besson novels if you wanted, or Thomas Jodorowsky's, I think that's his name, right? Swimming in the Dark. It kind of fits in that world of queer fiction, coming of age, gay novels. It's not really about coming out as much as about the kind of internal workings of sexuality and kind of finding your place in the world. So this one comes out on the 24th of April next year, so keep your eyes out for it. And if you like Sean's work, you will enjoy this book. I also read Kaveh Akbar's Martyr, finally. My friend Jack lent it to me, so I finally read it. Jack, you can have this back now. I love Kaveh's poetry. I did not love this novel. I really liked the first third. I really got into it. I thought it was a great voice, but it slowly fell apart for me as the book went on. I think it was too long. I think it was trying to do too many things. It's about a guy called Cyrus, and Cyrus is an addict. He's living in the wake of his mum's death a long time ago, who was killed as a plane was shot down, flying from Iran by American Air Forces. And he's kind of living in the wake of that death, as well as his own kind of queer sexuality, his addictions, his attempts at writing. And he wants to write a book on martyrdom. And he finds out that this artist is performing a kind of final show at a museum in New York, and she is dying. And basically she spends her final days in this gallery space, and he goes to see her. And I'm not going to say too much because there will be spoilers kind of, or like reveals, and I don't want to do that. But it is about art, it's about faith, it's about memory. It jumps all over the place in time and place, and like usually I love that kind of thing, but this got on my nerves a little bit. I really felt like this book could have been tighter and shorter had it been focused just on Cyrus. We stayed in his mind across the days that he's in New York. I think that would have been like a fascinatingly kind of close novel, whereas this becomes a bit sprawling. And I guess I should have expected that. If you hear Kaveh talk anywhere, he's so clever. He's got so many ideas. He talks at the speed of light. He's really, really excited by everything and language and possibility. And I love that. But in the novel, I felt like it needed more kind of focus, more tightening, sharpening up. Yeah, so like the beginning was great, but then it kind of slowly got more annoying. I finished it because I obviously finish books. I always finish books. But it kind of fell apart for me. Yeah, it wasn't what I wanted fully. But let me know if you disagree. I also obviously got the latest Annie Ernaux book that's published by Fitzcarraldo. This is one that she wrote with Marc Marie. It's called The Use of Photography. And this is a stunning book. Basically, she has this love affair with a photographer at the time that she learns she has breast cancer. And the book charts basically that time through photographs. So her and Mark, this photographer, take photographs of the places that they're staying in, the places that they have kind of sex in. And they're just photos of like their clothes on the floor, a kind of shoe fallen over, is like a belt, there's kind of like a hotel room. And they basically both write about that photograph and the things it emerges for them. So we read Ernaux's essay or like little fragment first, and then we read Marc Marie's fragment afterwards. And it's interesting because you see both of their perspectives on not only the photo, they kind of closely read the photo in a really beautiful way, and then they tell you their kind of emotional state at the time of that happening. It's a really glorious book. I need to read it again. It really shuttles between kind of the very everyday, right? Like describing the kind of turned inside out jeans that are on the floor, through to kind of Annie's hair falling out during chemotherapy and her kind of experience of her body as like a woman, as a sexual body, as a kind of as a body that's also one that she writes about so extensively, right, in all of her books. I think she's doing so many things here, as well as Marie, obviously, as well. Like, it's not just her. But if you like her work, you will love this, I think. It's really heartbreaking in places, it's funny in places, it's beautiful. Just like so many great photos in here too, that I think, even on their own, there's something really thoughtful to dwell on. I think it's a really interesting way into thinking about one's relationship with another person and how you navigate that time in memory. So yeah, highly recommend that one. And then the other 3 books I read were rereads, and these were for work, for teaching. So one was Percival Everett's The Trees, which I think I've reviewed on here before, so I'm not going to say too much about it, other than every time I reread it, I find it really powerful. It's funny. It's a crime novel that resists and questions crime tropes. It thinks about the role of the police, it thinks about race. If you haven't read Everett before, this is a great place to start. It gives you a sense of his kind of wild humour, his real kind of clear-eyed look at race relations in the US. And not just race relations, but like how historical violence and contemporary violence are on a continuum, how we think about the past, how we grapple with it. He offers no easy answers to any of the things either, any of the questions he sets up, like what is justice, what is retribution. None of those things are very simple for Everett, and his books somehow tread this line between like very clever and thoughtful and intellectual, but also super readable, playing with the genre, has great character. So I highly recommend that if you haven't read it. But that was a reread. I also reread Cormac McCarthy's The Road, which you probably all know about at this point, and I've probably talked about before, so I'm not going to say more about that, other than it makes me cry every time. I think it's a pretty brilliant novel, even if it is dubious on gender, right? It's an incredibly masculine world. I'm really confused. Well, not confused, like I guess I know why that's there, but the rest of the book is so thoughtful, so beautifully written and nuanced that I'm kind of sad about the fact he doesn't take women seriously in the book. Yeah, let me know what you think about that below. But it's the one kind of glaring thing that stands out over and over again. And I guess you could say that throughout all of McCarthy's books, except maybe for like The Passenger and Stella Maris, which came out more recently. But yeah, my students liked it too, even though it's bleak. And then I also reread Exit West by Mohsin Hamid, which I probably haven't talked about here. And this is a book, if you don't know, is about these 2 characters, Nadia and Saeed, and they're living in an unnamed country, which is interesting for a number of reasons. And one day these portals, you could call them, start cropping up all over the world. And these portals are kind of like doorways that if you step through them, you just end up in another country. And the novel starts in a kind of time of political strife, the country that Saeed and Nadia are living in, which is possibly a Muslim majority country, possibly not. It's possibly the Middle East, it's possibly not. There are kind of uprisings, there is violence on the streets, and one day they kind of step through this portal into another world. They end up in Greece, and then they kind of move around the world, and it becomes clearer that the world is striated by this violence, by refugees everywhere. The whole world has become more kind of porous and permeable. Borders are starting to kind of fall away as people step through these portals. Some countries end up blocking the portals to stop people from coming through. This is a comment on so many things, this book. Like, A, it's very readable, but B, it's also doing some interesting things about the planet and where we are now. Maybe it's not the most subtle of novels, right? Like, it kind of wears its politics on its sleeve. It's trying to tell us about how things like this, like mobile phones, computers, allow you to kind of step through a portal into another place, another world, right? It's not hiding that metaphor at all. That when I FaceTime a friend, like I literally can kind of step through that world into their world. But he's also not shy about saying that this is a novel about globalization, about migration, about immigration in all kinds of ways, but also the kind of rootlessness of people everywhere in the 21st century and beyond. I think it's super readable. If you haven't read it before, you might have read The Reluctant Fundamentalist. I think that's also a really interesting book. I haven't read The Last White Man because I heard lots of critiques about it, so I haven't got to that one yet. But this, I feel like, is a really accessible, open way into thinking about some of the big topics of our time. And maybe you want something more intense, more challenging, more intellectual than this. That's not a read, but just you might want something that's more rich and interrogative, maybe. But if you want something that you can like quickly slip into, that has a strong story, that has great characters, that really makes you think and feel, then I recommend it. I think it's a great book to kind of get you in there. And yeah, it has a lot to say about the world we live in now. And I think we need fiction like that more than ever at this point in time. So yeah, let me know if you've read that one. As ever, please like this video. Please subscribe if you haven't already. We're almost at 1,000, so please subscribe if you haven't. If you've been watching and you haven't subscribed, please do. Tell people you know to subscribe. Ring the bell for notifications, then you know when videos come out. And please do comment below, because I love hearing what you think. I love hearing your contrary opinions. That makes me very happy. And yeah, let me know what you've read in October or what you're looking forward to reading in November, December. There's only a month and a half now until the end of the year, so not much time left in the year to kind of read the books you wanted. So let me know what's coming next. And until the next video, take care of yourself and take care of each other, and see you soon.